So I'm Sonya Goddy, and my film is called Sunday.
Sonya, I'm gonna hit you with a direct question. Why do you make films?
I think the reason why I'm a filmmaker and don't do other forms of art instead, is that film combines so many different things that I'm interested in. I'm really interested in storytelling, but I'm interested in the visual aspect, I'm interested in the writing aspect, and I'm interested in telling stories in time. I think that's the main thing. But unlike theater, there's much more in play in a film because of the visual aspect. So I think that's why I'm specifically a filmmaker, because it allows me to combine so many different ways of storytelling all at the same time, simultaneously.
Let's come back to Sunday.
Okay.
What is your film about? What's the origin of the story?
The origin of the story is actually a real anecdote that my friend told me one day when I was just hanging out in his kitchen, and I thought it would make a great short. And then I took it and changed it and adapted it away from his life. He didn't really want me to use the real details. But yeah, wait, was that what the question? What's
your film about?
What's the film about? So the story is that it's about a mother driving around an unfamiliar neighborhood with her very young son. And for some reason, we don't know why, the son is the one giving directions to the mother. And we find out why later, and there's a twist. But really what I was interested in exploring in the film is the question of trust and the way trust functions in intimate relationships.
So you'd say that this is the message of more the idea that you want to push towards the audience?
I think that's the theme that I personally was interested in. This kind of the interplay of sort of trust and boundaries with parents and children, and sort of, who's the grown-up in the situation and who's the child, and what happens when these sort of intimacies develop between parent and child that don't necessarily feel like a parental situation anymore. And I think that I'm kind of obsessed with the topic of trust and honesty and how it relates to information in general, in relationships. So yeah. And also sort of, I think that the other theme in the film that's something I'm obsessed with is information as an emotional commodity, that people sort of trade in information with each other, and who withholds what at which point in our kind of intimate relationships with each other. I think I'm really interested in that.
I watched the film last night with my mom, and she loved
perfect.
it, and she said, "Oh, it's such a tragedy." And for me, it was somehow on the reverse spectrum.
It was a comedy.
It was rather a tragic comedy, let's say.
Right.
Where would you put it? Simplistically.
I wouldn't say it's a tragedy, not in the Aristotelian sense. Right. Not in the Greek sense, but yeah, I would say that it's a comedy that underlying the comedy is a lot of really sad, tragic emotions. Definitely. That's what the moment with the mother, there's a very emotional moment where we see this woman's sadness, and that's why that's in the film. I think that I personally was in the mood to try to mesh the two, because that's also something I'm interested in. Is it possible to get to that place where you're exploring something that's actually kind of dark and sad and messed up? But can you also laugh at it? Is it possible to get an audience to do that?
You'll love it in Romania, in this case.
Oh, yeah. Well, Romania, that's great. Yeah, a lot of the Romanian cinema I know is more sort of in the tragic realm. But there's, I mean, it's kind of a cliche to
It's
say
funny,
it, but
it's a tragic
yeah.
realm, but we laugh at it with great pleasure. So it's so very interesting response of the Armenian audience to the Armenian films.
That's interesting.
It makes us laugh like hell.
That's great.
And I think it's the black humor.
I agree, yeah, and I think that there's always comedy in tragedy and tragedy in comedy.
What did you learn about yourself after making this film?
What did I learn about myself? So many things. I'm always learning about myself, whether I want to or not. I think in making that film, I learned to trust my instincts a bit more. There's always this kind of, whenever you're making a movie, there's so many moving parts, and it's just always a chaos. It's like you have to be a sort of adrenaline junkie to enjoy it, which unfortunately I am. But it's sometimes really hard to listen to that inner instinctive voice. And there's also a lot of voices in your head saying, you know, that are like, make it correctly, or, you know, make the movie so that other people like it, and then the voice, the instinctive voice is very small sometimes. So that was a movie that I made it very quickly for very little money. I wrote it quickly, we shot it very quickly, I edited it in, you know, less than 2 weeks, actually. I think it was about 2 weeks. So I just sort of executed it the way I felt it should be done, and I didn't have a lot of time for self-doubt, and I wasn't trying to make the film that would represent me as a person. I was just making that particular movie, and I think what the things I learned, that's not really a good answer to what I learned about myself, but I think I learned to trust my instinct more, and I also learned that there's a value to not being overly precious, and trying to make a masterpiece is great, but it's kind of a trap. It's more important to just make that particular film and to just leave your own self-doubt and insecurity. Just try and get rid of it, you know, before you make something.
What is the best and the worst part about being a filmmaker?
The best part is that it's the most fun thing you can do. It's basically like being a child and playing dress up, imaginary. It's like playing a game and using that to sort of tap into real emotions and try and make art that other people relate to. I mean, there's nothing better than that. The worst part is that it's a fucking nightmare, though. You might not want to use that because I curse. The best part is that it's the most fun thing, and the worst part of filmmaking is that it's a nightmare because it's very difficult to do, and it requires a lot of money and a lot of people, and it's very unstable, and you never know if you're going to get to make another movie, and it's like being in a very unstable marriage. I'm constantly saying that I'm going to leave filmmaking and do something else, and every time I'm about to leave, something pulls me back in.
You just told me that you're a New Yorker, born and bred. How would you say that being born and living here in your life influenced your work?
It's a very dynamic, textured place. And I think for someone who's obsessed with people and behavior, New York is an incredible place to grow up. And that's probably the main thing. Also, though, I think it's actually a very difficult thing to say, this is what I'm going to do with my life, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I really admire people who come from small, isolated places, who come to that on their own and actually say, no, I'm going to do that with my life. It's easier to do it when you come from a city where you're surrounded by artists and you understand that that's something that you can choose to do. So I think that made it a little bit easier for me because it's a little bit of a crazy thing to do with your life.
What's the number one question on your mind these days?
Just in general.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be related to film.
I think that I'm engaged in a constant kind of conflict that does have to do with filmmaking, which is the conflict between art and entertainment, the conflict between survival under capitalism and spiritual survival, and what that means to me as a filmmaker. So, who am I making work for? Does it have value and meaning? Is it a narcissistic pursuit that's about entertainment and money? Or is it about art, and is it spiritually fulfilling enough? Do I have to make films that are about something more? Because I don't really make social realist films, not in a direct way. And I'm really cautious about making didactic films, but I think that I'm constantly engaged in these kind of crises about my work. Is it important enough to tell stories? And I think the answer is yes. And then, of course, like all artists, I'm also, is this material worth making? Am I good enough? But I think the main thing is film itself is such an interesting form because it's constantly straddling this kind of commerce and art. And I think that's the main question that I lie awake at night thinking about sometimes.
We're getting closer to wrapping up.
Okay.
In all sincerity, do you know anything about Romania?
In all sincerity, I know very little.
Okay. Tell us that very little that you know.
I really only know the things that you have told me. At Columbia, this film 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days was part of our curriculum. And so that exposed us to, a certain facet of the culture, society.
That's great, that works for me.
Yeah.
This is what I'm trying to prove in the end, that
So
you
this
can touch
is-
people with this products.
Absolutely. So that's what I know of Romania is actually mostly through film.
One last message to our audience that is going to meet you this summer.
Who's your audience? People are going to watch this?
Yeah. Local people of our small town.
I can't wait. One last message. I would have to say thank you. How do you say thank you in Romanian?
You can go for the short version, which is adapted from French, which is merci.
Merci. And also, no, that's it. Just merci. See you soon.